Good morning, kids. And we continue understanding about biology for NTSE. And today we are going to deal with the heading life processes. And out of life processes, we are going to deal with 4 of them today, one after the next. Beginning with the first one. And certain names are pretty important in this one. That is autotroph, of course, we know. And then we are going to understand about heterotrophs. Autotrophs, those who are making their own food, and heterotrophs, that will be depending on others, like those of us. The mode of nutrition in this case, of course, is holozoic. Holozoic is that consuming the nutrients as whole. For example, human beings or plants, the holozoic mode of nutrition is there. And if you're talking about heterotrophic, that may be, of course, beginning with some of the positive ones and the negative ones. It may be parasitic, it may be saprophytic, and maybe symbiotic. Let's deal with these first, and then we'll take a few more. Parasitic, for example, certain examples we must be having in our minds. Parasites may be inside parasite or outside, the endoparasites or the ectoparasites. Parasite and host relationship we all are aware of. Parasites are going to take up the food, shelter, everything from the host, and in turn they are going to impart disease and death finally to the host. And in case of parasites, the internal parasites may be there. For example, some of the lukes are there, liver fluke is there, and tapeworm is there. They are internal parasites, including nowadays this fever is very much prevailing, plasmodium, that is also internal parasite. Ectoparasites may be this lice, ticks, mites and all, those who can bite, including leech that sucks the blood. They all will fall in the category of external parasites. After the parasites, the next one, of course, is the saprophyte. Saprophyte, we know that they will be feeding on dead and decaying matter. Actually, they are the cleaners of the system. They are good for us. But at times they grow on the food items also, that basically harms. And in saprophytes, we know the category will be, of course, fungus. Mostly the fungus are dangerous for us, but some of the fungus are edible, like those of mushroom. Symbiotic, of course, we know symbiosis about lichen, wherein the alga and fungus, they stay together. But here, one important term is there, that such type of relationship wherein we are discussing about lichen, the relationship is actually known as obligatory. Obligatory means you remove one and another one dies off. So they are so much so dependent on each other. Okay. And heterotroph, some other modes of nutrition. For example, if you are talking about scavenging, scavengers will be those, they will be, of course, for example, nowadays we have not seen them much, but there are animals which feed on the dead flesh. Jackals are there. Okay, once these animals, they die out and they eat of the dead flesh out of that particular animal. They are also cleaners of the system. Once they leave this, the remaining part is actually taken up with the help of the saprophytes. So in case of these, and one more term very, very important that falls in this category only, wherein we are supposed to understand, they are, of course, autotrophs. In autotrophs, one category is epiphytes. Epiphytes will be those plants, and the best example of epiphytes is orchids. For example, if it happens in dense forest, for example, in a tree which is growing, and on its branches, these small trees, small plants, green leaves, you can say a cluster of green leaves, either way you call them as, it appears as though it is a big bunch of grass, and it grows on the branches. Its roots keep hanging. The hanging roots, they absorb moisture from air. And why they are growing on so top high? Because, say for example, in case of tropical rainforest, the forest is so dense that sunlight doesn't reach to the bottom of it. The floor of the forest, that we say, it doesn't reach there, and they need to do photosynthesis. Then what will they do? Definitely they are going to grow up at such a height wherein they can get the sunlight, they absorb the water and moisture from the soil. But why they are not parasite? Because they are not taking anything from the tree on which they are growing, except for the place to stay on. And how will we find out that they are not taking it? See, if at all we happen to grow, for example, there was this one National Geographic one video they had shown, and in that this scientist, he just climbed up that particular tree and he went up high and he had lifted these epiphytes. They can be lifted very nicely. That means they are separate, they are not putting their roots into the tree. So therefore those will be falling in the category of epiphytes. Now here, once we are talking about parasite, partial parasites, insectivorous plants we have heard of. Insectivorous pitcher plant is there, sundew or Drosera, Venus flytrap. All these plants, their texture is such that they attract the insects towards them. And once the insects are there inside them, they trap and they dissolve their body inside them. The outside covering made up of chitin or chitin, that only remains, and the remaining body is actually digested. Now the question comes that why do they trap? Are they autotroph? Yes, they are extremely well organized autotrophs. Then why do they trap the insects? Because the soil in which they grow. For example, this pitcher plant or Nepenthes, this grows basically in India. If you want to search in for in Assam, many of the places they grow in plenty. Those soil samples were collected and they were tested out, and what was found out that that particular soil is deficient in nitrogen. Now if nitrogen is less, and of course any structure, I must repeat here, any structure in the body is actually made up of very important component without which the structures cannot be made, that is nitrogen. So they need nitrogen for their growth, and nitrogen is deficient in the soil. So from where to get the nitrogen? They get the nitrogen by trapping the insects. So they are autotrophs, but yes, of course, they are insectivorous. So that's totally a separate category. So that's all about the nutrition, various types. And now we are going to understand about nutrition in amoeba. One word very, very important, of course, we know that is about the food vacuole. It is going to trap the food, the pseudopodia, and it's going to trap the food and take it inside. And in the food vacuole, only the food will be digested. The extra things will be given out, removed out of the body. Single cell performing all the functions, no division of labor. And here, if you are trying to understand about photosynthesis, except for the definition, we must know. Now, MCQs, they may ask, from where does this oxygen come? That comes from the photolysis of water. These are a few terms which are very, very important under the heading photosynthesis. And for photosynthesis, of course, we know that they are going to trap solar radiations, green pigment chlorophyll is needed. And yeah, of course, they're going to do photosynthesis and they are going to release the extra waste, gaseous waste from their body, and that is oxygen. That is very, very useful for us. And the oxygen that comes out due to photolysis of water. This photolysis of water releases oxygen. The life-giving oxygen has been released by the breakdown or the photolysis of water molecules. Okay, so that is very, very important in case of the photosynthetic process. Of course, we know that CO2 is reduced. Carbon dioxide, in this very important one more on which the questions may be based, that is CO2 is reduced. It is reduced to carbohydrates. And of course, opening and closing of stomata, on that also the question may be asked, and why the opening happens during the daytime only? Because daytime there is plenty of photosynthesis. And in photosynthesis, what happens when the food is synthesized from all the cell parts? It will be synthesized by the guard cells also. Guard cells, and once they synthesize the food, they have plenty of food with them, then of course this becomes the hypertonic solution inside them. So they start absorbing water from the surrounding, and once they start absorbing water from surrounding, they will swell up, and of course the transpiration rate becomes higher during the daytime. And of course, one more thing, where do we have this more amount of stomata? It always will be on the lower side of the leaf. Okay, and what about the stomata in case of xerophytes? These we are talking about mesophytes. This stomata and the story of transpiration we are all talking about in case of, there are three types of plants we know very well. Hydrophytes, mesophytes, and xerophytes. Now hydrophytes example are, for example, Hydrilla, Vallisneria. Mesophytes, any of the plant around you, any tree, any plant around you. Okay, for example, if you are taking up neem or any plant, name it and you have it. Xerophytes, of course, cactus, and opuntia is a commonmost cactus we know all about. Okay, here you may mention for banana also. So what happens that in case of those plants which are growing in water, they will not have well developed root system, because root system, basic function of the root system is to absorb water, and there is plenty of water around. The root system is ill developed, and of course if they are growing in or around water, definitely they need not release more and more of the water. Transpiration, why transpiration is needed? One of the very important reason is that the plant needs to remain itself cool. Okay, that happens in case of mesophytes. Mesophytes which are growing on land but not completely dry area. Those plants which are growing completely on dry area, like those of sandy areas. Okay, so there they need to actually absorb. Their root system is so well developed that if you have 1 feet high on the surface of the ground, a cactus, then it must be around 4 to 5 feet down under. And what is the function of that? It is going to absorb more and more water molecules as far as possible. And if it is absorbing with that great difficulty, it cannot afford to lose the water, just like this transpiration and the guard cells remaining open. So in this case of xerophytes, what we have is another term, we call it as sunken stomata. The stomata no doubt will be there on the lower side of the leaf. Lower side, of course, yes, but on the lower side also they will be sunken. They won't be there on the surface. They will be much below the surface, so that the water is not lost very easily. And of course, there is one term we know very well, that variegated. Variegated leaves are those leaves which will have patchy pattern in that. That means the chlorophyll is not present all over. There are patches of green color on the leaves. So we call such leaves as variegated leaves. And now coming down to the nutrition in case of human beings. Human being nutrition, of course, there are certain names related with the teeth, the type of teeth we have. We have, of course, 2 types of teeth, the milk and the permanent teeth, and then again the 4 types of teeth. Following that, the food enters from mouth to the esophagus. Mouth, salivary amylase. There are certain terms which are related and very, very important with each and every organ. Once you're talking about and here right from mouth we start off, and in that case you are supposed to keep in mind salivary glands, parotid, submaxillary, submandibular, and they are all exocrine glands. They release saliva, and saliva contains salivary amylase in it. And this amylase, if it is released from here, amylase will always, see, the enzymes will function on their substrate, and accordingly their names are there. If you are talking about amylase, that means it is digesting amylose. That is the bigger molecules into the smaller ones. Okay, so it converts starch and all those to bigger molecules to of course, it breaks down to the sugars. See, the chain is very simple. The smallest one is glucose. Glucose units join together to form sugars, and plenty of them will join together to form a bigger complex molecule starch. Usually in our diet, we have starch. For example, chapati or rice that will have starch in it. That is about mouth. And esophagus has got no role in digestion. Now the food moves to the stomach. And you know very well that in case of stomach, it is the protein that gets digested to amino acids. And due to this only, because the stomach has got a major role to digest proteins specifically, therefore only the herbivores have longer small intestine, because their basic food is cellulose. And now the food moves from there to the small intestine. And of course, here the role will be there for the enzyme pepsin. And here in small intestine, of course, we know that we get the secretions from liver, that is the bile juice. Bile juice, it makes the medium basic, two roles, basic medium. It has plenty of bicarbonate ions in it, so basic medium, and of course, emulsification of fats. Emulsification of fats. And from, of course, one more secretion that comes, that is pancreas, and there it releases amylase, pancreatic amylase. So basically these are also helping in the digestion. And where do they get attached? Small intestine has got three parts. They get attached to duodenum. The second one is jejunum, that means the middle one. And the last one is ileum. Okay, here basically the remaining digestion and the absorption takes place. We know very well that after the food passes through small intestine, it has to go through the villi-like structure. That means the absorption will also take place here only. As far as absorption is concerned, we are going to always talk about villi or the finger-like projections to increase the absorptive surface area. Here, one thing very, very clear, we must keep in mind that all the absorptive surface areas will be single cell thick, they will be moist, and they will be richly supplied with blood capillaries, because therein we need to have a proper absorption. Moving ahead with this now, trying and understand about respiration. Before we start moving for respiration, I am preparing the board for that. Let's have all the 5 steps of nutrition. The 5 steps of nutrition, the first one is ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. 5 steps of Holozoic mode of nutrition under the heading of respiration. Respiration, of course, we know that there are certain animals which will be having different organs for respiration. And for example, in case of fish, it is gills. That also may be asked in there. We are talking about fish, frog, and let's take for mammals directly now. Because in case of birds and mammals and reptiles, this will be common. And here, of course, gills, and here gills and lungs. In tadpole, it will be gills, and here specifically we have the lungs. And trying and understand about various types. Of course, why lime water turns milky? Because in the lime water we are passing on exhaled air. Exhaled air carries more and more of carbon dioxide. Now talking about respiration specific process. When you're taking in air and taking out air from the lungs, that is known as breathing. After breathing begins the function of respiration. And in respiration, we may ask for the 3 various steps, wherein you have aerobic is totally different. And in case of aerobic, you will be getting the end products as CO2 plus H2O plus energy. And in anaerobic, if it is taking place in muscle cells, you will be getting lactic acid plus energy. And here you will be getting ethanol, C2H5OH plus CO2 plus energy. This variation must be very, very clear in our minds, that there is no CO2 produced once anaerobic respiration is being taken up by the muscle cells. If you are working hard, what happens that after some time the muscles will start becoming lethargic and they need some energy, so they start undergoing anaerobic respiration. And anaerobic respiration, in case of aerobic, it is 38 ATPs. That is the amount we need. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, that energy currency of the body. And lactic acid also, in this anaerobic respiration releases less amount of energy. But still then, once we need more and more energy in our body, this amount of energy also helps us. Now in this case, please remember that there are two cytoplasm glycolysis, and in case of mitochondria, Krebs cycle. This releases 2 and this releases the remaining 36. That makes a total of 38 ATPs. For example, if any cell or any part of the human body is undergoing anaerobic respiration, that means there is less amount of, we usually write in our terms that there is no oxygen. Well, no oxygen is a wrong notion. There is actually less amount of oxygen. And less amount of oxygen means that the cells are going to undergo anaerobic respiration. And if the cells have plenty of oxygen, they are going to go aerobic respiration. And in case of anaerobic respiration, small amount of energy is released and this lactic acid basically jams the muscles. In this case, once the muscles are jammed, they must be released with the help of warm water. That means if those muscles are bathed in warm water, the lactic acid is released, and therein the athlete or the person who is working hard and whose muscles have been jammed can continue going ahead with his or her work. This is very, very important in cytoplasm glycolysis. Whether it is aerobic or anaerobic, glycolysis will definitely be there. But if it is aerobic, then after glycolysis, Krebs cycle will take place. Remember this always. Okay. And one more thing that is important under the heading of respiration is respiratory gaseous exchange, and that happens in the alveolar region. Inside the alveoli, oxygen is more, and outside the alveoli in the blood capillaries, carbon dioxide is more. Exchange of gases takes place with simple diffusion process, higher concentration to lower concentration. CO2 will be moving in from the blood capillaries to the alveoli, and oxygen in turn will go from alveoli to the blood capillaries. And here, of course, we must know about one very, very important feature, that basically oxygen is transported by RBCs, red blood cells, and that too we know specifically hemoglobin in RBC. And CO2 is transported in dissolved form by plasma. Plasma, the liquid that we have in our blood, that is responsible for it. So that's all about respiration we need to know as far as NTSE is concerned. Moving ahead and trying and understand the next category, that is about transportation in human beings as well as transportation in case of plants. In case of plants, we know very well that the transportation of water and food takes place. Water will be dealt by xylem. And food will be dealt by the help of the phloem. And in transportation, of course, we need to understand that in case of human beings, there is this closed circulatory system wherein the blood never comes in contact with the tissues. But there are lower organisms wherein the blood comes in contact. For example, in case of prawn or insects, so there we call it as open circulatory system. wherein the blood comes in contact with the tissues at various places. And here one name, of course, we know, blood, and its various components we know very well. RBCs, the smallest ones, transport of oxygen. WBCs for immunity, they help in fighting against the infection. And platelets for blood clotting. And of course plasma, in which all the dissolved states will be followed. And how this blood basically flows, that is once again a very, very simple method. The upper ones are of course the auricles, the lower ones are ventricles, and how we are going to write it as right and left. So this is my right and this one will be the left of the diagram, and if I'm writing the other way, it must be opposite. For example, this, if I'm writing this way, opposite I will be writing. Impure blood comes down to right auricle, superior and inferior vena cava. From right auricle it goes to the right ventricle. From right ventricle it is sent with the help of pulmonary artery and vein. These two words are very, very important because they are exceptions. So here pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. This artery carries deoxygenated blood and this carries oxygenated blood. That's an exception. Okay. Now in this case, right ventricle sends it to the lungs. From lungs it gets purified and it enters into left auricle. From left auricle the blood goes to the left ventricle, and from left ventricle through aorta it is sent to the whole body parts. So circulation, these names are also important, and they may be asking about the valves. The AV valves, there are two AV valves. We have AV, aerioventricular or atrioventricular valves, tricuspid and bicuspid. These valves are there. Now this tricuspid is present between right auricle and right ventricle, and this is present between left auricle and left ventricle. And of course in these tubes we have semilunar valves. After filling up they shut down, and every time we are talking about this complete whole cycle, it completes, it is known as cardiac cycle, and it completes in 0.8 seconds. The whole story that we are talking about, that the blood comes in auricle, goes through ventricles and all that story, it ends up in 0.8 seconds, cardiac cycle. And of course one name is very, very important. We know about blood pressure. The blood pressure of course may be of two. It may be diastolic, systolic. Diastolic, of course, when the heart is expanding, definitely the pressure will be low. So that is 80 mm of Hg. And this is 120 mm of Hg. When it is contracting, systolic, and it is of course more, and this is measured with the help of sphygmomanometer, the instrument that is used for this one. And in this case, platelets, they basically perform the function of blood clotting. And of course we know there is one more fluid that flows in our body, and that fluid is actually known as lymph. So how are we going to define lymph? Lymph basically will be from plasma. If we remove proteins, the bigger proteins, then you can call it as lymph. So that is in your exam, if it is asked in MCQs, this is plasma minus proteins. And this lymph is actually being driven in the body with the help of the lymphatic vessels. And lymphatic vessels are open-ended vessels. they carry most of the bigger molecules from one part of the body to the other. That function that cannot be performed with the help of blood vessels, that function is performed by lymphatic vessels. And of course, some of the immune system also works on this. It plays an important role in immunity also. Now, in case of transportation of plants, 2-3 terms are very, very important. Of course, we know that two of them, water and food, and this is for xylem and phloem. And here it happens, the transportation happens with the help of transpiration and root pressure. Transpiration during the daytime, transpiration pull specifically will be helping in that, and root pressure, of course, at night, and the transportation of food with the help of phloem, sideways, downwards, all the way around, that will be, of course, known as translocation. The transportation of food by the plants, that will be falling in the category of translocation. And after this, we need to understand about excretion. Again, a very important topic from wherein they may ask us certain questions, certain important things. Understanding about excretion is, of course, excretion in case of humans as well as in case of plants we are going to cover up. And that is the last topic of today. Now, based on various types of the waste released, I think it got stuck, the video got stuck, and let me rejoin the meeting, kids.
Yes, ma'am.
The video is paused, I think. I'll leave the meeting and just again continue, okay? Don't worry.
Okay, ma'am.
The camera is not functioning. So I'll just get back to you, beta. I'll just end up the call and join again. I don't think it is working again. Just give me 1 minute. I'll restart the system and again I'll be joining you. I'll complete your excretion heading today itself, beta. Okay, just be there. 1 minute of time. I'll restart the system and join you again.
Okay, ma'am.
Beta, camera is not responding at all. Okay. So we'll continue this topic tomorrow. It's not getting fixed up. Okay. We'll continue from this heading and the furthermore tomorrow. Don't worry. We'll wind up. And I am going to post certain exercise questions. Okay. It's good that you can hear me. At least this microphone is working. I am going to post certain exercises today itself. Please go through them and we are going to discuss the remaining part of today as well as tomorrow's lectures in tomorrow's class only. Okay. All the best, kids.
Okay, ma'am.
All the best, kids. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, kids? Ashish, Mansi, Priyanka, Pragya, Sumit, Parth, Suruchi, Priya. Can you hear me, kids?
Yes, ma'am.
You can please inform your friends that it's working now, and let's complete today's topic. Okay? It started working, beta. So let's wind up the last heading of today's topic. Please inform your friends. Some friends they have left, so please let them know that it has started working. We'll be dealing with the last heading now, that is excretion, aniline excretion based on the end products. Based on the end products, that means the waste that we are secreting. Based on that, there are three categories: ammoniotelic, ureotelic, and uricotelic. That means in this case, ammonia is the end product, and here the end product is urea, and here it is uric acid. And this will be the case in case of fish, and urea, for example, humans, and uric acid, for example, in case of birds. And the waste product that is released from the body, that is specifically nitrogenous waste we are discussing about. And here it may happen so that it is passed out of the body with the help of the excretory unit named as nephron. And in case of nephron, this is the Bowman's capsule. In the Bowman's capsule, all the waste of the body is poured, and from there it moves down to the Henle's loop, wherein reabsorption takes place and excretion in the last part of it. So there are three parts in Bowman's capsule. With the help of glomerulus, the filtration or ultrafiltration or absorption will take place. And the second one in case of loop of Henle or Henle's loop, reabsorption. And last, of course, in the collecting duct, secretion. Now, what all do we have from these categories? In case of the first one, that is in case of filtration or absorption, most of the things are absorbed. That means be it good or bad. Water, salts, urea, amino acids, anything that is in excess is absorbed or filtered. The next one, of course, in loop of Henle, most of the things are again reabsorbed, which are required by the body. Water, then amino acids, useful substances, they are reabsorbed. Little amount of urea is also reabsorbed back to maintain the pH balance of the blood. Last, in the collecting duct, some part is secreted, the water, and of course some ions are secreted, and that actually makes the urine. Once it comes out from the collecting duct, we may call it as urine. Until that time, it keeps on passing throughout the system. We call it as filtrate. Okay, and in case this is all about in case of human beings, and if the kidneys are not working, functioning properly, then in that case we need to go in for dialysis, that is artificial filtering of the blood. And in that case, what happens that there is this machine, dialyzing machine, in which dialyzing solution is there, wherein the artery and vein are connected. From the artery, the blood goes in, gets filtered, and again it is poured back to the body. The process may continue for a few hours depending on the amount of blood waste collected in the blood. And the number of times it will be done, that also will be decided by the doctors based on the waste produced by that particular human being. Organ donation has always been the best asset in our day-to-day life. And of course, make sure that after the death, up to 24 hours, we are not brain dead. Still then, some of the organs can be removed and can be transplanted in other human bodies, saving its life. As far as excretion in case of plants is concerned, plants do the excretion by depositing all their waste. There are three types of waste in that: gaseous, liquid, and solid waste. Gaseous waste, carbon dioxide, oxygen is removed from the stomatal openings, and in case of liquid waste, in the form of transpiration through stomata and through lenticels in the liquid form, guttation takes place. That means the water is removed in the form of water itself. And last but not the least, the solid waste is actually deposited in the leaves and the fruits that are going to fall down. That means those organs of the body which will be removed, there they go and deposit the solid waste, and the waste is removed from the body. Try to read and up to here whole of the chapter, and please try to attempt the exercise questions which I am going to post today, and we are going to discuss about the remaining biology portion in tomorrow's class. All the best, kids. Keep preparing. Happy learning.